The fluorescent lights of Chicago's Lincoln Memorial Hospital flickered overhead as Dr. Ella Carter stared at the termination letter in her hands. Her fingers trembled, making the words blur together, though she'd already read them a dozen times. Effective immediately, gross negligence, patient death, medical license under review. She'd been a surgeon for 8 years. 8 years of grueling shifts, of holding lives in her hands, of making impossible decisions in seconds. And now it was over because of one mistake, one moment when exhaustion and a faulty monitoring system had aligned in the worst possible way. The patient had been a 42-year-old father of 3. Ella had performed the surgery flawlessly, but in the recovery room, overwhelmed by 3 simultaneous emergencies and trusting a malfunctioning alarm system, she'd missed the signs of internal bleeding. By the time the nurse manually checked on him, it was too late. The hospital needed someone to blame. The equipment manufacturer had lawyers. Ella had pride and principles. She'd refused to lie, refused to shift blame to the nurses or residents. So she became the sacrifice. "Dr. Carter?" The security guard's voice was gentle but firm. "I need to escort you out." Ella gathered her few personal items, a photo of her late mother, a stethoscope that had belonged to her grandmother, and a small jade Buddha her mother had given her for luck. Some luck, she thought bitterly. As she walked through the hospital corridors for the last time, past colleagues who averted their eyes, past the familiar sounds and smells that had defined her adult life, Ella felt something inside her crack. Not break, she'd already broken when that patient died. This was different. This was the sound of her entire identity shattering. Outside, January wind cut through her scrubs. She'd forgotten her coat in her locker and was too proud to go back for it. The Chicago skyline stretched before her, indifferent to her pain. She'd grown up in this city, the daughter of ordinary people, her father a taxi driver and her mother a nurse, who'd sacrificed everything so she could become a doctor. Her mother had cleaned houses and offices to pay for Ella's pre-med courses. Her father had worked double shifts at a restaurant until a heart attack killed him during Ella's residency. And now she was 34 years old, unemployed, probably unemployable, and utterly alone. Her phone buzzed with a text from her former mentor, Dr. Patricia Walsh. "I'm sorry, Ella. You deserved better. If you need anything." Ella deleted it without responding. Sympathy felt like salt in her wounds. She walked for hours through the freezing city, until her feet were numb and her tears had frozen on her cheeks. Finally, she found herself in front of the Chicago Public Library, seeking warmth and anonymity among the stacks. In the quiet corner of the medical section, a cruel joke that. She pulled out her laptop and began searching for jobs. Hospital after hospital, clinic after clinic. But news traveled fast in the medical community. Her name was already circulating in the whisper networks. That surgeon who killed someone through negligence? The details didn't matter. The narrative was set. By evening, she'd applied to 40 positions and received 3 automated rejections. She returned to her studio apartment, 600 square feet of loneliness, and lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling. Her phone rang, an unknown number, probably a reporter or a lawyer. She almost didn't answer. "Dr. Carter?" The voice was warm, southern, male. "My name is James Ford. I'm the director of the Beartown Community Health Initiative in rural Montana. I know this might seem like it's coming from nowhere, but I heard about your situation, and I wanted to reach out." Ella sat up. "How did you?" "Patricia Walsh is an old friend. She thought you might be interested in something different. Look, I'm not going to pretend I don't know what happened in Chicago, but out here in Beartown, we don't have the luxury of turning away qualified doctors. We serve a population of about 3,000 people spread across 500 square miles. The nearest hospital is 90 miles away. We need someone with surgical experience, someone who can handle emergencies, someone who isn't afraid of hard work. I'm under investigation," Ella said flatly. "My license might be suspended." "Illinois license," James corrected. Montana has its own medical board. They're less concerned with politics and more concerned with whether you can save lives when there's a blizzard and the ambulance can't get through. Patricia sent me your file. The real file, not the hospital's cover story. She told me what really happened. And more importantly, she told me about the hundreds of lives you saved, the free clinics you ran, the residents you mentored. Ella's throat tightened. Why would you take a chance on me? Because second chances are what we do out here, James said simply. This isn't Chicago. This is a place where people know how to forgive mistakes, where they judge you by what you do today, not what you did yesterday. The pay is about a third of what you made at Lincoln Memorial. The accommodations are basic, and you'll work harder than you've ever worked in your life. But if you're looking for a place to heal while you help others heal, well, there's nowhere better than Beartown. Ella looked around her empty apartment at the life she'd built that had crumbled so completely. What did she have to lose? When would you need me to start? 3 weeks later, Ella stood in the parking lot of the Great Falls Airport, searching for James Ford among the handful of people waiting at arrivals. A man in his 50s, with graying hair and kind eyes, approached. Wearing a thick winter coat and holding a hand-lettered sign that read, "Dr. Carter, welcome home." "Welcome home," Ella repeated, her voice skeptical. "I've never been to Montana." James grinned. "Not yet, but give it time." He took her suitcases, everything she owned now fit in 2 bags, and led her to a well-used pickup truck. "It's about a 3-hour drive to Beartown. Hope you don't mind country music." As they drove through landscape that seemed to stretch forever, mountains in the distance, vast expanses of snow-covered plains, sky so big it made Chicago seem claustrophobic, James told her about the town. Beartown used to be a mining community. When the mines closed in the 80s, most people left. The ones who stayed are stubborn, proud, and suspicious of outsiders. But they're also the most loyal, generous people you'll ever meet. They look after each other because out here, you have to. "How did you end up here?" Ella asked. "I grew up in El Paso, went to medical school in Houston, planned to be a big city cardiologist. Then I did a rural rotation in my 4th year and realized I'd found my calling. That was 20 years ago. Never looked back." "No regrets?" James was quiet for a moment. "I lost my wife to cancer 5 years ago. The nearest oncology center was too far away. The treatments too little, too late. So yeah, I have regrets, but they're not about being here. They're about not being able to do more. That's why we need people like you, Ella. People with advanced training who can bring big city medicine to small town needs." As the sun began to set, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold, they crested a hill and Beartown appeared below. It was smaller than Ella had imagined, a main street with perhaps 24 buildings, houses scattered around the edges, a church with a white steeple, and on the outskirts, a row-slung building with a red cross painted on the side. "That's the clinic," James said. "It's not much, but it's ours. We have 2 exam rooms, a small operating theater for minor surgeries, basic diagnostic equipment, and a 4-bed ward for observation. When we need anything more sophisticated, we stabilize and transport to Great Falls. The helicopter can get here in 30 minutes if the weather's good." As they pulled up to the clinic, people began emerging from nearby buildings. An elderly woman with white braids, a man in a cowboy hat and worn jeans, a young mother holding a toddler, a teenage boy on crutches. "Word travels fast out here," James said with a smile. "They wanted to meet you." Ella felt a flutter of panic. What if they knew about Chicago? What if they judged her? But as she stepped out of the truck, the elderly woman came forward with a warm smile. "Dr. Carter, I'm Eleanor Whitehorse. Welcome to Beartown. We're so grateful you've come." One by one, they introduced themselves. Tom Brennan, the rancher. Sarah Kowalski, who ran the general store. Andrew Williams, the high school principal. Jenny and little Sophia Carter, no relation, but it made them laugh. Bobby Winters, who'd broken his leg in 3 places and still wasn't healing right. Their faces showed no judgment, only hope. Hope that Ella could help them. Hope that she'd stay. James showed Ella to her living quarters, a small house behind the clinic, sparsely furnished but clean and warm. "This was Sarah's place before she moved in with her sister. She wanted you to have it." said every doctor needs a home. That night, lying in an unfamiliar bed in an unfamiliar place, Ella heard silence like she'd never experienced in Chicago. No sirens, no traffic, no city sounds. Just wind and the occasional bark of a dog. It should have been peaceful. Instead, she lay awake, haunted by the face of the man who'd died. His name was Andrew Thompson. She'd looked him up after, read about his life, his family, his dreams. His children had been 12, 9, and 6. His wife taught 3rd grade. He'd coached Little League and volunteered at the food bank. And he was dead because Ella had trusted a machine instead of her instincts, because she'd been stretched too thin and pushed too hard, because she'd made one terrible mistake. Tears came then, hot and bitter. She cried for Andrew Thompson and his family. She cried for the career she'd lost. She cried for her mother, who died believing her daughter was a success. Most of all, she cried for the person she'd been, confident, capable, certain of her purpose, and the hollow shell she'd become. Her first day at the clinic began at 6 a.m., with James showing her around the facility. It was shockingly basic compared to Lincoln Memorial. The operating theater was a single room with aging equipment. The diagnostic technology was 10 years out of date. The medicine cabinet was organized but sparse. "We make do with what we have," James said. "Sometimes that means improvising. Sometimes it means knowing when to transport. The key is never pretending we can do more than we can." That last sentence hit Ella like a punch. She'd pretended she could handle 3 emergencies at once. She'd pretended the monitoring system was reliable. She'd pretended she was superhuman. Their first patient was Eleanor Whitehorse, coming in for blood pressure medication refills. She chatted warmly with James while Ella took her vitals, her hands shaking slightly. "Nervous, dear?" Eleanor asked gently. "A little," Ella admitted. "Don't be. James told us you're one of the best surgeons he's ever met. We're lucky to have you." The words should have comforted her. Instead, they increased the pressure. What if she made another mistake? What if someone died because she wasn't good enough? The morning continued with routine cases: a child with an ear infection, a ranch hand with a laceration that needed stitches, an elderly man with arthritis seeking pain management. Ella handled each one mechanically, triple-checking everything, second-guessing every decision. After lunch, a call came in. Tom Brennan's son had been kicked by a horse and wasn't responding properly. Possible head injury. "You take it," James said. "I'll be right there if you need backup." Ella's heart hammered as she prepared the exam room. When they brought in 17-year-old Jake Brennan, his eyes were glassy and his pupils uneven. Classic signs of concussion, possibly worse. She ran through the protocols, ordering tests, monitoring his condition, but with each decision, she hesitated. Should she transport immediately? Wait and observe? What if she missed something critical? "Ella," James said quietly, pulling her aside, "you're a good doctor. Trust yourself." "I can't," she whispered. "What if I'm wrong? Then we'll deal with it. But right now, Jake needs a doctor who can act, not second guess. What does your training tell you?" Ella closed her eyes, breathing deeply. The knowledge was still there, underneath the fear. Moderate concussion. No immediate signs of brain bleed. Monitor closely for the next 6 hours. If condition worsens, transport to Great Falls. She opened her eyes. "We keep him here for observation. Check pupils and cognition every 30 minutes. If there's any deterioration, we move him." "Good," James said. "Trust that." Jake's condition remained stable. By evening, he was joking with his father and complaining about the bland dinner. Ella felt a small victory, but couldn't quite celebrate. She'd done her job, but barely. The confidence she'd once had seemed like a distant memory. Over the next few weeks, Ella fell into a rhythm. The clinic saw between 15 and 30 patients a day, everything from colds to minor surgeries to chronic disease management. The work was relentless, but different from Chicago's frenetic pace. Here, she had time to actually talk to patients, to understand their lives and their challenges. She learned that Tom Brennan's ranch was struggling financially, that Eleanor Whitehorse was raising her grandson alone after her daughter died of addiction, that Sarah Kowalski's store was the social center of town where people gathered to share news and gossip. that Andrew Williams's school was desperately underfunded, with teachers buying supplies out of pocket. These weren't just patients, they were becoming people she cared about. But the fear never left her. Every decision felt fraught, every symptom potentially catastrophic. She lay awake at night reviewing cases, wondering if she'd missed something, imagining worst-case scenarios. James noticed. One evening after a particularly long day, he knocked on her door with 2 cups of coffee. "Can we talk?" he asked. They sat on her small porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. "You're a good doctor, Ella," James began. "Maybe even a great one. But you're terrified, and that terror is affecting your ability to heal, both others and yourself." Ella's hands tightened around her coffee cup. "A man died because of me." "No," James said firmly. "A man died because of a perfect storm of circumstances, an overworked medical system, faulty equipment, impossible expectations. You were part of that system, yes, but you weren't solely responsible. Tell that to his family." "I can't, but I can tell you that beating yourself up forever doesn't honor his memory. You know what would? Becoming the doctor you're capable of being, saving the lives you can save, learning from what happened without letting it destroy you. What if I make another mistake?" "You will," James said bluntly. "Medicine isn't perfect, and neither are we. But the question isn't whether you'll make mistakes. It's whether you'll let one mistake define you forever, or whether you'll grow from it and keep helping people." Ella felt tears on her cheeks. "I don't know if I can." "You don't have to know right now. Just take it one day at a time, one patient at a time, and maybe talk to someone. There's a therapist in Great Falls who does video sessions. Patricia Walsh recommended her. She specializes in helping healthcare workers with trauma." The suggestion felt like both a lifeline and an admission of weakness. But Ella was drowning, and she knew it. "I'll think about it," she said. The crisis came in March, during the worst blizzard Beartown had seen in decades. Ella was alone at the clinic. James had driven to Great Falls for supplies and gotten stranded by road closures when Sarah Kowalski burst through the door, supporting her sister Lisa. "She's bleeding," Sarah gasped. "She's pregnant, and she's bleeding." Lisa Kowalski was 6 months pregnant and hemorrhaging. In Chicago, this would be an immediate call to OB/GYN, a rush to the OR, a full surgical team. Here, Ella was alone with basic equipment and no backup. "Get her into the exam room," Ella ordered, her voice steadier than she felt. As she worked, her hands moved through familiar motions, checking vitals, starting IVs, doing an ultrasound with their ancient machine. What she saw made her blood run cold. Placental abruption, the placenta separating from the uterine wall. The baby's heart rate was dropping. Lisa was going into shock. This required immediate surgery, full anesthesia. Potentially a hysterectomy if they couldn't control the bleeding. It required things Ella didn't have. "I need to transport you to Great Falls," she told Lisa. "Right now." "Roads are closed," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "The highway's completely blocked. Even the helicopter can't fly in this." Ella felt panic rising. This was her nightmare, another patient dying because she couldn't save them. History repeating itself. But then she looked at Lisa's face, at her terrified eyes, and something shifted. This wasn't Chicago. This wasn't Andrew Thompson. This was right now, right here, and she was the only chance this woman and her baby had. "Sarah, call everyone you can. I need anyone with medical training, EMTs, veterinarians, retired nurses, anyone. Tell them to get here however they can." She turned back to Lisa, taking her hand. "Listen to me. I'm going to do an emergency C-section. It's risky, but it's your best chance. Both of your best chances. Do you trust me?" Lisa, pale and shaking, nodded. "Save my baby, please." Ella sterilized the small operating room, laid out instruments with shaking hands, and prepared herself mentally. She'd done C-sections before, dozens of them during her OB/GYN rotation, and a few emergencies at Lincoln Memorial. But never alone, never with such limited resources, never with so much at stake. The door burst open. Andrew Williams arrived first, followed by a local EMT named Chris Dawson. Then Mrs. Patterson, a retired nurse in her 70s. "Tell me what you need," Andrew said. Ella assigned roles, Andrew to monitor vitals and anesthesia. She'd talked him through it. Chris to assist with instruments. Mrs. Patterson to prepare for newborn resuscitation. Then she closed her eyes for one moment and thought of her mother, of her grandmother, of every patient she'd ever helped. "Trust yourself," she heard Jane say. The surgery was the most intense of her life. With minimal anesthesia and basic equipment, every cut had to be precise. Lisa remained semi-conscious, biting down on a leather strap against the pain. The room was silent except for the beep of monitors and Ella's quiet instructions. When she delivered the baby, a tiny girl, blue and silent, her heart sank. Mrs. Patterson took the infant immediately, beginning resuscitation while Ella worked frantically to control Lisa's bleeding. Time stretched. Ella's entire world narrowed to the task at hand, ligating blood vessels, examining the uterus, making split-second decisions about whether she could save it or needed to remove it entirely. Then, cutting through the tension, a sound, a baby's cry. "She's breathing!" Mrs. Patterson called out, tears streaming down her weathered face. Ella didn't pause in her work, but relief flooded through her. Now she just had to save the mother. It took 2 hours of painstaking surgery, but finally Lisa's bleeding was under control. Ella had managed to save the uterus. Both mother and baby were stable. As Ella stripped off her gloves, her hands were shaking so hard she could barely move. She walked out of the operating room to find the clinic waiting area filled with people. Half the town had shown up, waiting in the storm to hear news. "They're going to be okay," Ella said, and was immediately engulfed in embraces and tears and gratitude. Sarah hugged her so tightly Ella could barely breathe. "You saved them! You saved my sister and my niece!" "We all did," Ella said, looking at Andrew and Chris and Mrs. Patterson. "We all saved them." James arrived back in town the next day, roads finally cleared, to find Ella sitting beside Lisa's bed, watching over her patient. The baby, named Ella in her honor, was in a makeshift incubator that Chris had rigged up. "I heard what happened," James said quietly. "Everyone's calling it a miracle." "It wasn't a miracle," Ella said. "It was terrifying. I doubted every decision. I almost froze." "But you didn't. You did what needed to be done." "I had no choice." "You always have a choice. You could have given up, told them it was impossible. Instead, you trusted your training and saved 2 lives." He paused. "That's who you are, Ella. Not the person who made one mistake under impossible circumstances. You're the person who fights for her patients, even when everything's against her." Ella looked at the tiny baby, at Lisa sleeping peacefully, at the community that had rallied together. "I think I need to call that therapist." "Yeah?" "Yeah. Because as terrifying as last night was, it also felt right, like I was doing what I was meant to do. And I want to feel that way, without the crippling fear. I want to be the doctor I used to be, but better, someone who's learned from mistakes without being destroyed by them." Over the following months, Ella began the hard work of healing. Weekly video sessions with Dr. Helen Martinez, a trauma therapist, helped her process the guilt and fear she'd been carrying. She learned to distinguish between healthy caution and paralyzing anxiety. She practiced self-compassion, something that felt foreign but necessary. The community of Beartown became part of her healing too. She joined Eleanor Whitehorse for weekly dinners and learned about Native American healing traditions. She helped Tom Brennan with his ranch books, discovering she had a knack for financial planning. She taught first aid classes at Andrew Williams's school. She also began writing letters to Andrew Thompson's widow, not seeking forgiveness, but offering sincere apology and explanation. She didn't expect responses and didn't receive them. But the act of facing what had happened, of taking responsibility without drowning in shame, was liberating. 1 year after arriving in Beartown, Ella stood in the clinic's expanded facility. James had secured a grant to add 2 more exam rooms and update equipment, and reflected on how much had changed. She'd delivered 8 babies, performed countless minor surgeries, and saved 3 lives in emergencies that would have been fatal without immediate intervention. She'd earned the trust and respect of the community. She'd even started mentoring a pre-med student from the high school. sharing her knowledge with the next generation. But more importantly, she'd learned to trust herself again. Not the blind confidence she'd had before Chicago, but something deeper, a confidence tempered by humility, strengthened by adversity. The door opened and James walked in with a letter. "This came for you." Ella recognized the return address immediately. Chicago. Her hands trembled as she opened it. It was from Andrew Thompson's widow. "Dr. Carter, I received your letters. For a long time, I was too angry to read them. Angry at you, at the hospital, at God, at Andrew for leaving us. But my children helped me understand something. They remembered you from that day, how kind you were before the surgery, how you explained everything in a way that made them less scared. My youngest, Emma, drew you a picture that Andrew had taped to his hospital room wall. You probably never saw it. I'm not writing to say I forgive you. I'm not there yet, and I don't know if I'll ever be. But I am writing to say that I understand you're human, that you carry this burden too, and that I don't want my husband's death to destroy another life. Andrew would have wanted you to keep helping people. He believed doctors were heroes, even when they made mistakes. Maybe especially then, because it meant they kept trying despite the risk. So please, Dr. Carter, keep trying, keep saving lives. And when you do, remember Andrew, and let that memory fuel your compassion rather than your fear. Respectfully, Jennifer Thompson." Ella read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. It wasn't forgiveness. Jennifer was honest about that. But it was something equally precious: permission to move forward. That evening, she gathered with friends on Eleanor's porch, a weekly tradition they'd developed. As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in impossible colors, Sarah raised her glass. "To Ella, the best doctor Montana ever stole from Chicago. To second chances," Ella added quietly, "and the places we find them. To all of us," Eleanor said, with her gentle wisdom. "To communities that heal together." As they clinked glasses, Ella felt something she hadn't experienced in 2 years: peace. Not the absence of pain or regret. Those would always be part of her story. But peace with who she was becoming. A doctor who made mistakes and learned from them. A healer who was also learning to heal herself. A person who'd been broken and was slowly becoming whole. She thought of her mother, who'd cleaned houses so Ella could have opportunities. She thought of her grandmother, whose stethoscope still hung in Ella's office. She thought of Andrew Thompson and the gift of Jennifer's letter. She thought of Lisa and baby Ella and every patient who trusted her with their care. And she thought of Beartown, this small town that had given her something Chicago never could. A place where she wasn't defined by her worst moment, but by every moment after. Every choice to show up, to try, to care, to grow. "What are you thinking?" James asked. Ella smiled. "That I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." The winter night was cold, but surrounded by friends, with purpose in her heart and hope for tomorrow, Ella Carter felt warm. The journey wasn't over. Healing never really is. But she'd learned that second chances aren't given. They're created. One choice at a time, one day at a time, one life saved at a time. And in a small clinic in Montana, under a sky full of stars, she'd discovered that sometimes the greatest success isn't avoiding failure. It's learning to rise after falling, and using that hard-won wisdom to lift others as you climb back up.